Hey everyone, it's ENDYMION, and there's a lot of really bad things going on right now in the gaming industry, and I figured that we need to talk about it and collect it all into one video here, so hopefully I can start a conversation. From Sweet Baby ending another studio, Thomas Mahler of Moon Studios claiming that DEI ruins art, layoffs at other studios pushing identity politics, and Ubisoft pulling merch because of cultural insensitivity, so let's get into it. Firstly, it has been confirmed that another Sweet Baby adjacent studio in the form of Surgeon Studios has had massive layoffs following the release of their game Tales of Kenzara Zal, which was spearheaded by Abu Bakr Salim. If you don't know who this is, he was the voice of Bayek in Assassin's Creed Origins, which I think he did a phenomenal job as. I've actually spoken to Abu Bakr Salim via DMs, and I expressed to him that I very much enjoyed his performance as Bayek in AC Origins. And I even resonated with that character a lot, even though I am clearly not an Egyptian man myself. I also DM'd Abu Bakr when House of the Dragon Season 2 started, and I saw that he was in the show playing Alan. I thought his performance was great, and I congratulated him, and he responded in thanks. I have no ill will towards the guy at all. He even gave me free Steam codes for Zao, to which I just passed them over to my girlfriend, who I assume gave them to her friends because, well, I don't play on Steam, I'm a console peasant. Anyway, the point being here is that I feel for Abu Bakr Salim. While I have yet to play Zal myself, because I'm currently trying to review Silent Hill 2 Remake and the looming shadow that is Dragon Age Veilguard, which is approaching very quickly here, I do think out of most of the games correlated with Sweet Baby Inc., Zao didn't look that bad at first glance. Granted, again, I haven't yet played it myself, even though Salim did give me a code for the game on PS5, I just haven't gotten around to it. I figured if I was going to speak on this story with Surgeon Studios that I need to be completely transparent with everyone that's watching. Just like the whole Thomas Mahler Moon Studios thing when he denounced that developer Ray, who I actually knew from when I first started YouTube, I am doing that again here. When I saw that Surgeon Studios effectively laid off their entire employee roster, it was kind of unfortunate to see. Apparently they have another game prototype in the works that they want to make, but it needs funding. But as for Zao, it looks to be a one-and-done kind of game. Video games are hard, they're volatile, and with so many games coming out constantly, it's very easy to get lost in the shuffle of it all. The unfortunate reality for Zal was simply that it was aligned with Sweet Baby Inc., and because of that, what happened, happened. I don't think the game or the studio suffered because of the quality of their game, they suffered due to their association with a group that evidently seems to ruin much that they touch. I mean, the fact that God of War Ragnarok, another SBI game, was only able to get 50% or less the players on Steam, compared to the original game when it came out on Steam, is wild to me. That a PlayStation icon like Kratos was also not able to push through the tainted poison that is SBI either. It makes me interested to see how Spider-Man 2 will fare when it launches in January 2025 on Steam. Will people buy that game knowing that it is egregiously aligned with Sweet Baby Inc., that its narrative designer praised them and protected them too? Because I do believe that objectively most of, if not all, consultancy groups these days anyways, don't actually make games better with their direct involvement. I believe the best form of diversity is the natural kind, where it is not forced, but simply is. There's a reason why I love characters like Barrett Wallace in Final Fantasy VII, and personally, I found his story in Rebirth, which was expanded upon, to be one of the best elements of that game for me. However, what these consultancy groups have been proven to be are nothing short of liars at the best of times. Besides SBI, you have stuff like Black Girl Gamers, a consultancy group that specializes in black voices. I mean, obviously, the name gave it away. You would think this would be a good thing, however, the objective reality tells it otherwise. They worked on Forspoken, a game that tanked Luminous Productions, which made Final Fantasy XV, which was a mega smash hit. Black Girl Gamers, when given the chance to bring forth a new bold person of color main character in a fantasy setting, had all the potential in the world to really make a statement with that game. And the end result that was decided that the best depiction that felt authentic to them was a poor, ridden black girl whose dad is not in the picture and abandoned her at birth, which is yikes. And then she has a white single mother who is left struggling and ends up leaving her too, if you can believe it. And she lives in a rundown apartment committing crimes to get by. This is what Black Girl Gamers came to in their own actions as to what should be their depiction of this new, strong black female character. I'm not even black, and I found Frey Allen in Forspoken to be offensive in her depiction. It would be the equivalent of a new Chinese character, and it's somebody who just wears a farmer's hat 24/7, just kind of like throwing rice at people. It's a caricature is what it is. I really couldn't believe my eyes when I played Forspoken, and the only other game that we know of that Black Girl Gamers is directly involved in is Dustborn, a game where its black heroine is a superhuman who uses her powers to gaslight and manipulate her own friends, and leave the world in a worse place the moment she enters the picture. This is not being done by me, or me trying to twist the narrative. This is genuinely how both of these games went down. And it's so bizarre to me that a consultancy group who focuses on one particular group can so effortlessly destroy their own public perception, not once, but twice like this. It is as people like Elon Musk said recently that DEI kills art, and I agree. I believe that a lot of this ethnic diversity pushing does not come from a place of genuine love, but instead it is shoehorned in because the implementation of such concepts will absolutely lead to the criterias getting met that lead to grants being given to said studios. It's like with Dustborn, a game that was solely funded by government grants. The sad reality is that I truly believe, based on the information and actual actions of the gaming industry, that to me, a lot of this DEI stuff is just performative. Why nobody cared about female characters being playable or people of color being in games in the 80s, 90s, or early 2000s, but suddenly now is a problem should be a topic of discussion that we should be having. And I think ultimately the reason for this is simply because it's never felt more artificially implemented than it does right now. Thomas Mahler, the CEO and creative director at Moon Studios, which made the Ori games and now No Rest for the Wicked, had this to say about DEI via Twitter recently, so let's read what he said. I never retweeted anything from Elon before because I'm a game designer, but I very much agree with this statement. The problem with DEI isn't in its principle, but in the way it's being implemented. Years before diversity, equity, and inclusion became a thing, we had Quentin Tarantino, a white director who made a movie about a badass black dude who buddied up with a white dude. My point being, just let artists be artists and DEI will happen naturally. Ultimately, a good message has to come from the heart and not from indoctrination. And I agree with this as well. By the way, the movie he's referencing is Pulp Fiction, awesome movie if you haven't seen it somehow already. And it's a great movie showcasing a very charismatic and powerful black character in it. Zed's dead, baby. I love that movie so much. I think Thomas is brave to say the things that he's saying, especially during this time as a game designer. Thankfully, he runs the studio, so it's not like any activist could really get him fired anyway. He would have to hire them first, and let's be real, he probably won't do that. But I do believe that actual real diversity comes naturally, but sadly these days it feels much more like these things are implemented simply because of indoctrination and fear. Take for example Halo Studios, the new name for 343 Industries. This is from Park Place. Halo Studios senior community manager implies gamers are racist after questions raised regarding employees' embrace of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. This community manager's name is John Junzek, which I definitely mispronounced. Anyway, he said this via Twitter. In nearly a decade of serving in a public-facing role in gaming, I've never had my passion or work experience questioned due to my race, religion, gender, etc. Not even after game delays or server outages, when I'm out on the front line as the bearer of bad news, sadly. It's no secret that my experience is far different than many game developers, especially when compared to devs that happen to come from marginalized communities. This contrast shows that we all have work to do and continue making gaming and game development a better space for people to do their best work. I appreciate how supportive our community has been over the years, and I'm glad to see that continue to this day. Please continue to do your part, practice kindness, be human. It's a very publicly safe answer to give, although objectively speaking, these marginalized groups that John speaks of have actually had far more opportunities thrown at them in the past 4 years, unlike any other group. If anything, it's actually white male developers that are ostracized and pushed out for simply being white. What I think is happening in the gaming industry is not healthy because it doesn't solve anything. We went from a supposed primarily white game dev industry in the West anyway, that was allegedly shoving out minorities, although we have no actual proof of that officially, but let's roll with it for the sake of this argument, to now having minorities becoming the majority and refusing to hire white male game devs now instead. All the industry has done is reverse the situation with no proper solution in place. I know it's a hard thing to talk about for some, but let's be honest with ourselves, which is that neither of these options are reaching what people like John and others advocate for. Because neither option, whether it's fully white or minority driven, is true equity, because someone always has to be stepped over in order to make one group feel better about themselves. And how does this solve anything? It doesn't. True equity would simply be that people are hired based on merit alone. Whether this means that the studio head becomes a white man or a Chinese woman is irrelevant as long as the person most qualified is given the job. To say that black people or any other minority is somehow unable to gain these positions due to what they deem to be socioeconomics or whatever other buzzword they want to use, simply states that these people who push said diversity are in fact the most racist people, and actually, they see minorities as beneath them. Because if all they see is race, they don't really see these people for people. Instead, people who have to check lists in order to get hired. How is this acceptable? It's a terrible idea in both practice and execution, as we all know. By saying they don't want race to be seen, instead these people at SBI, or really any other company in general, instead make everything about race all the time 24/7. They even make people go to seminars about it. Things have swung so far from one side of the pendulum to the other that nothing really feels in balance anymore. The diversity angle may have worked in 2016 or so, but these days people are not receptive to it. And then you need to ask yourselves as game devs and such, why that is. Could it be that everyone is just inherently racist, as this John of Halo Studios claims it to be? Or could it be that people are simply sick and tired of having agendas pushed in their faces and being told they need to accept these things or face social and financial ridicule? It's like for anyone out there, when your parents told you to not do something, that just made you want to do it even more. Don't touch that, don't drink that, don't you dare go out and party all the time. And what did most of you do? Yeah, you went out and did those things anyway. I know I did. And it's the same mentality that has been wired into our brains when it comes to games and entertainment. You have to buy this game because it's diverse, and if you don't buy it, you're racist. You also have to play the game starring the minority character or you will be deemed problematic. Now multiply this narrative tenfold and it's no wonder why none of this is being accepted. Because it's not being done naturally. It's like a guy who gets a girlfriend through his charm versus a man who has to pay a woman to be interested in him. They both hypothetically reach the same destination, yet one is far more genuine than the other alternative. And you really can't argue with that. Like Thomas Waller said, diversity, equity, and inclusion can be natural as long as it's allowed to play out in real time against what actually matters in the industry. Circling this all back to Zao and Surgeon Studios, while I don't doubt the game is at least competently made, arguably the selling points of that game when it was being released was that it was diverse and that it was made by diverse people. Instead of selling the game saying that it's a love letter to, say, side-scrollers or, I don't know, Metroidvanias. You instead see a narrative form before even knowing what the game even is. This does not help your sales practices. It's why these things fail. A good example of DEI, I guess to a degree, would be Space Marine 2. It recently broke over 4.5 million sales. Good for them. Happy to see a great game doing so well. It also stars a white, black, and Asian guy. None of it feels forced. These guys just kind of exist as they are in the game. And there's really nothing to say that is bad about any of it. Yeah, they're all ethnically diverse, cool, but that doesn't matter for their character, does it? When someone asks, why do you like Titus in Space Marine 2? The answer is not because he's a white guy. The actual answer will be his undying loyalty, his bravery, his strength, and his ability to lead his men into the gates of hell itself against all odds. What I think a lot of game devs don't seem to realize is that the skin color and pronouns of your character are but secondary, if at all important, to the actual way that players will resonate with a character. I think Lara Croft is dope because she's badass and resourceful and fearless. Yet in the new Netflix show, she's suddenly a lesbian, and you have reviews like this at theguardian.com, where they claim that the new show is good simply because it is a feminist reinventation of the legacy character. Suddenly, Lara is gay, her teammates are also gay, and it just kinda all feels like propaganda. You need to come to terms that people who are normal and not drowning in the identity sauce truly do not care what you are or where you came from. Someone can be black, white, Asian, whatever. What matters is their character, not what's between the legs or the pigment of their skin color. Unfortunately, these days, that's what these writers and producers seem to only focus in on. Why should I buy your game Dustborn? Oh, well, it's made by queer people about queer people fighting a conservative establishment and reinforces our ideology through the game's design. Cool. No wonder nobody bought it, but why should you play Space Marine 2? Well, you get to chainsaw aliens in half and headbutt smaller aliens with your skull so hard they explode into blood gravy. Notice how I didn't mention the political views or skin color of some dev here, because it's irrelevant. The art, the product if you will, should speak for itself. If why your game is being pushed and marketed is solely based on the identity of the people behind it, or the color of the main character, you are going to lose a lot of people. In Zhao's case, it seems that not even the target audience if you will, which is black gamers I guess, came out to support it. Yet black gamers as well as Mexican ones, they went crazy over Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Ask yourselves why black and Mexican people resonate so well with Goku and friends when they look nothing alike. It's simply because they resonate with what the ideals behind these characters represent. Dragon Ball as an IP champions getting ripped, working out, push yourself beyond your limits. And then there's also villains like Frieza who are space racists that call Saiyans monkey, which is still crazy. Also, Frieza can now turn black so you can't even cancel him for his words. His own evolution has uncancelled his racism. He is the ultimate villain. I'm telling you, once Frieza can evolve into a Chinese version of himself, he's going to be unstoppable. Because then he can just change his form based on which level of racism he wants to apply to his enemies. He's going to become invincible is what I'm getting at, but you see what I mean? People resonate with Dragon Ball not because they're aliens from another planet or they're able to turn into giant Godzilla-sized monkeys. Although that would be cool to be able to do, let's be real, but simply because they resonate with the ideals and message behind the IP. That is how you make a strong franchise. Goku could be any color, it doesn't really matter. He will still resonate based on who his character is. And I mean, Dragon Ball has tons of female characters, both new and old. I don't see anyone saying that Kale or whatever is bad. Just make cool characters. I mean, I don't know. I really like Jiren. I think he's dope as hell myself. I also think that Hit is super cool too. Sure, he's just purple Piccolo in a jacket, but who cares? I like him anyways. I'm not a purple alien or a gray-skinned, big-eyed alien like Jiren, but I like those characters anyways and what they represent. What the industry needs to realize is that identity and representation will not sell you anything but disdain these days. I mean, look at Dontnod, the studio behind the Life is Strange games. They're facing massive layoffs there right now. A studio that has been pushing DEI and representation like crazy. Does it come to anyone surprised that this is happening? Not really. But then you have to ask yourselves why we're where we are right now with these sorts of things. When you have people like Kim Belair, Sweet Baby Inc., who is lying about changing Saga Anderson and Alan Wake, or saying that she has never used intimidation tactics when it comes to weaseling her way into studios, except ousting herself during GDC saying exactly that.
If you're a creative working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher-ups. And if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
Or the Validate dev who's working on Black Panther at EA who openly admitted to not wanting to hire white people simply because of their skin color. Or Chris Kindred, who tried to silence Cabrutus Rambo, and now the Sweet Baby Detected plugin on Steam has over 450,000 followers as of right now and growing. What you need to ask yourself when you're making these games is not whether players will be receptive or not, but look inward and understand if you're making these things for the right reasons. Objectively speaking, Spider-Man 2 was worse due to SBI's involvement. It just was. Anyone who rejects that can just compare Spider-Man 2 to the 2018 Spider-Man, where SBI was not there working on it, and the difference is night and day. These games are being ruined, and I need developers and studios to understand that you need to stop using these consulting groups because all they will do is ruin your financial future and public image due to what they represent, which is the industry gold standard of what not to do when it comes to selling your games to the general public. If you tell me I must support you because you are trans or you are black, I will not support your game because these things are irrelevant to what the product at hand is. It's like if someone was selling you pizza and you asked if it was any good and they say, well, I'm a gay person making pizza. Like, okay, that tells me nothing of the quality of the product at hand. What does your sexuality or your skin color have to do with you selling me pizza? I think what a lot of these game developers and consultancy groups are banking on is that in 10 or more years eventually, things will all become like Spider-Man 2 or Alan Wake 2 or Zhao and so on. Eventually, there will not be products available that don't in some way push this agenda. And I mean, they're even gatekeeping Japanese games from coming to Western markets unless said games pander and change things to fit this minority of weirdos' expectations and demands. Whether it's localization and so on, it just keeps happening. And we're now seeing the next meta of the game industry, which is remakes. Everything is going to get remade now because it's safer to do and will cater to already established audiences. Look at Silent Hill 2 Remake, it's a prime example of this. It also has Hit Detection, a consultancy group working on it. And like I said, I'm reviewing the game myself right now, and yeah, those female designs, they definitely scream modern audience consultancy for sure. Why I'm dreading this new meta going forward is not only is it a lack of creativity on studios' parts, but this will also allow these otherwise classic games to be remade with tons of modern deisms effectively ruining even games that existed already to some capacity. Some people ask, why don't they remake the Batman Arkham games? Do you really want that to happen? You know they're gonna sneak in loads of nonsense somehow into the game. Gender-neutral bathrooms, trans flags, randomly sprung up all over Arkham Asylum, which there's a joke in there somewhere, but anyways, moving on. The point is that I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see a lot of safe remakes getting announced that will inadvertently go back and make these stories, characters, and more worse. I'm dreading the eventual infamous remake where Cole McGrath is suddenly a woman randomly. And of course, we also have Metal Gear Solid 3 getting remade as well. I really hope they don't modern audience that somehow too. And this is why it's so important to talk about these things and call them out. Take for example Ubisoft. They were working with a company to make figurines based on Assassin's Creed Shadows. They made the now infamous broken Torigate statue with Yasuke and Naoe hanging out around a symbol that is important to Nagasaki and the nuclear bombing. They are now pulling that product from storefronts because it was culturally insensitive and was using a genuine moment of trauma in Japanese history as a backdrop for characters that didn't even exist during that time. But this is what DEI is. You get people in positions making decisions that shouldn't be there in the first place. If you actually hired based off of talent and merit, these problems would not squeak by like this so easily. They would instead be ridiculed rightfully before they were inevitably placed in front of the eyes of millions of customers. And now Ubisoft looks like absolute morons because of it, but it's not surprising sadly. The Torigate Shadows merch product is just a perfect example for DEI and the identity politics of not just gaming, but all entertainment industries. It's a sobering reminder that deep down ultimately these companies do not actually care about the representation at all, and they simply see these efforts pushed by themselves as checklisting agenda picks in order to just gain renown and make money off the backs, in this case, of literal thousands of dead Japanese people who perished in Nagasaki. Ultimately, this is why I dislike this push for diversity, because it is no longer about the quality of a product, but simply what these people think the product represents. The gameplay can be dog water, the story incomprehensible, and the controls basic at best. But none of this really matters as long as there is some form of ideology attached to said product. Like usual, this will not save these games or studios, it will only expose them further as to why these movements are dying, and rightfully so. Ubisoft is an egregious company at this point when it comes to these things. Gone are the days of Ubisoft making games with cultural authenticity. The only reason why they removed this Torigate product is not because they wanted to, but simply because they got caught doing it. They genuinely do not care about the diversity of their games or teams. They are just hiring people of diverse backgrounds, thinking that as long as they're diverse, that should be enough to make great games. And in turn, let's be real, it's all being done to up their ESG social credit scores, which is really what this is all about. Instead, we're left with a future where these companies are crumbling, their studios are dying, and these once great IPs are now getting ruined retroactively. You have to ask yourself, when enough is enough, if brands like Spider-Man, Assassin's Creed, God of War, and even stuff like World of Warcraft are being ruined by these things constantly. How much more failure can the industry take? I guess we'll see. But let me know what you think as always. Is DEI a deal breaker for you? What is a good example of proper diversity that doesn't feel condescending? Let me know. Thanks for watching, subscribe, thank you to my members and patrons, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.